October 12, 1963, started like any other crisp fall day in Millfield, Ohio. The trees along Maple Street were glowing orange and red, leaves drifting lazily onto sidewalks that hadn't changed in decades. It was the kind of small American town where everyone knew your name and your business. That Saturday evening, the annual Millfield County Fair was in full swing. The smell of popcorn and fried dough filled the air, country music echoed from tinny loudspeakers, and teenagers from every corner of town gathered beneath the bright carnival lights. Among them were 16-year-old twin sisters, Emily and Emma Harper, identical in appearance, but completely different in personality. Emily was the quieter one, thoughtful and observant, the kind of girl who noticed when someone felt left out. Emma, on the other hand, had a laugh that carried across parking lots and a confidence that made people turn their heads. That night, they dressed alike as usual, pale blue sweaters, dark skirts, and matching white sneakers. Their mother later told reporters it was just another fair night. The girls had asked for permission around 6 p.m., promising they'd be home by 10. Their father teased them, saying, "Don't win too many stuffed animals this time." Nothing about that exchange felt unusual. Nothing felt like goodbye. By 7:15 p.m., the twins were walking toward the fairgrounds, just under a mile from their home. A neighbor, Mrs. Daly, saw them pass by her porch and waved. She later said the girls looked happy, whispering to each other like they always did, sharing some private twin joke no one else could understand. The sun had just dipped below the tree line, leaving behind a deep purple sky. As they reached the entrance gates, the carnival lights flickered to life, casting everything in a golden glow. Several classmates confirmed seeing them near the ticket booth, laughing and debating which ride to go on first. At approximately 8:15 p.m., a local photographer captured a photo of the Ferris wheel in motion, and in the bottom corner of that photo, barely visible, were two familiar figures standing side by side. That image would later become the last confirmed sighting of Emily and Emma alive. Witnesses remembered seeing them near the game stalls, then later near the livestock barns. One friend claimed the twins mentioned meeting someone, though she couldn't remember who. Another said they seemed distracted around 9 p.m., as if something, or someone, had caught their attention. But no one thought much of it at the time. By 10:30 p.m., when the Harper girls hadn't returned home, their mother began to worry. The fair was close. The town was safe. This wasn't like them. Their father grabbed his keys and drove toward the fairgrounds, headlights cutting through the cool night air. The music was still playing. The rides were still spinning. But Emily and Emma were nowhere in sight. Their friends assumed they had already left. The ticket vendor didn't remember seeing them exit. And near the back fence of the fairgrounds, resting neatly on the grass, were two folded jackets, pale blue, placed side by side as if someone had set them down carefully. The twins had vanished without a scream, without a struggle, without a single clear sign that something had gone wrong. By sunrise the next morning, the disappearance of Emily and Emma Harper had already shaken Millfield. Word spread fast in a town that small. Church bells felt quieter. Storefront conversations stopped mid-sentence. By 8 a.m., Sheriff Robert Callahan stood at the center of it all, tall, broad-shouldered, his hat pulled low, his jaw tight with what looked like determination. He had been sheriff for nearly 2 decades. In Millfield, his word wasn't questioned. If Callahan said something, people believed it. And when he arrived at the Harper home that morning, he carried himself like a man who already had the situation under control. Inside the Harper living room, Emily and Emma's mother sat clutching a tissue, her hands trembling as she explained the timeline again and again. Callahan listened quietly, occasionally scribbling notes in a small leather notebook. But neighbors later recalled something unsettling. He didn't seem alarmed. Not the way you'd expect when 2 16-year-old girls vanished overnight. Instead, he spoke calmly, almost too calmly, suggesting that teenage girls sometimes need space and that perhaps the twins had decided to run off for a while. He assured the family there was no immediate sign of danger. By noon, he held a brief press statement outside the station. His tone was firm but controlled. "At this time, we believe this may be a voluntary absence," he told reporters from the local paper. No Amber Alerts existed back then. No statewide emergency systems. The sheriff's opinion shaped the narrative. He discouraged panic, said there was no evidence of foul play. He organized a small ground search but limited it to areas close to the fairgrounds. When a deputy suggested contacting state authorities for additional manpower, Callahan reportedly shut the idea down almost instantly. Behind closed doors, however, things didn't line up. 2 sets of jackets had been found folded neatly by the fence. Their purses were still at home. Their bedroom windows were untouched. None of their clothes were missing. To the Harper family, the runaway theory felt impossible. Emily had college brochures spread across her desk. Emma had just tried out for the school choir. There were plans, upcoming birthdays, a school dance, Thanksgiving dinner. Yet every time the parents pushed back against the runaway narrative, Callahan would gently redirect the conversation, reminding them that teenagers can be unpredictable. Within a matter of days, something else stood out. Callahan insisted on personally handling all incoming tips. Phone calls didn't go through dispatch, they went straight to him. Reports were filtered before deputies could review them. Volunteers who wanted to expand the search into wooded areas beyond town limits were told it wasn't necessary. And when a neighboring county offered assistance, the sheriff declined, saying Millfield could manage its own problems. Slowly, quietly, control of the case tightened around one man, and one man alone. About 2 weeks into the investigation, just when the search parties were starting to thin out and hope was beginning to fade, a new detail surfaced that should have changed everything. A traveling carnival worker named Daniel Reeves walked into the sheriff's station looking nervous. He claimed that on the night of October 12th, around 9 p.m., he saw the twin sisters standing near the edge of the fairgrounds, close to the gravel access road where vendors parked their trucks. According to Reeves, the girls weren't alone. They were speaking with a man leaning against a blue Ford pickup. Reeves described the interaction as tense. He said one of the girls, he believed it was Emma, had her arms crossed, shaking her head, while the other kept glancing toward the main fair area as if searching for someone. The man, Reeves claimed, appeared frustrated. At one point, he grabbed one of the girls lightly by the elbow. It wasn't violent, but it wasn't friendly either. Reeves admitted he didn't step in because he assumed it was a relative or someone they knew. In a small town like Millfield, people rarely imagined the worst. He only came forward after hearing the twins were missing. Sheriff Callahan took the statement personally. No deputies present. No secondary witness verification. Reeves later told a friend that the sheriff asked very specific questions, not about the man's face, but about the truck. Are you sure it was blue? Callahan reportedly asked more than once. Could it have been dark green? Maybe black? When Reeves insisted it was blue, the sheriff ended the interview abruptly, telling him he'd look into it. The official report filed the next day made no mention of a blue pickup truck. Then came the second irregularity. A young deputy named Mark Allison claimed that during a routine sweep of the wooded area behind the fairgrounds, he found a torn piece of pale blue fabric snagged on a barbed wire fence. It matched the color of the twins' sweaters described by witnesses. Allison bagged the fabric and logged it into evidence storage. But when he went to retrieve it 2 days later for further review, the bag was gone. The logbook entry had been crossed out, replaced with a note reading, "Item misplaced." Non-relevant. The handwriting, according to Allison years later, wasn't his. Rumors started moving quietly through the department. Deputies noticed certain files being pulled late at night when only the sheriff remained in the office. Witness statements were edited for clarity. Dates adjusted. Small but meaningful changes. When Allison questioned the missing fabric, he was told he must have made a mistake. When he mentioned the carnival worker's truck description, he was informed that the witness revised his memory. Yet Reeves would later insist he never changed his statement. And as winter settled over Millfield, pieces of the investigation seemed to vanish just as completely as the twin sisters themselves. By the early 1970s, the Harper twins' disappearance had become one of those quiet ghosts that haunted Millfield. People didn't talk about it openly anymore, but it lingered in the background of everyday life, in grocery store aisles, at high school football games, during Sunday sermons. Sheriff Robert Callahan, however, remained firmly in power. He had won re-election twice since 1963, his reputation untouched by scandal. To the public, he was steady, dependable, the kind of lawman who kept trouble away from small-town America. But behind that badge, something had changed. In 1972, nearly 9 years after the twins vanished, Callahan made an announcement that caught everyone off guard. He was retiring, effective immediately. There was no health crisis, no election loss, no public controversy. At just 52 years old, he was stepping down. During a brief statement outside the courthouse, he claimed he wanted to spend more time with family and enjoy a quieter life. Reporters asked if he had any regrets about unfinished cases. For a split second, witnesses said his expression tightened. Then he forced a smile and said, Some things just aren't meant to be solved. The retirement ceremony was strangely subdued. No marching band. No large celebration. A simple handshake from the mayor, a plaque for years of service, and that was it. Deputies later recalled that Callahan cleared out his office personally. He boxed his own files. He locked certain drawers before anyone could help. One former clerk would later say that several old case folders, including the Harper file, were missing from the storage cabinet within days of his departure. When she asked about them, she was told older records were being archived off-site. After retiring, Callahan moved to a rural property about 15 miles outside Millfield, a quiet stretch of land bordered by dense woods and open fields. The house sat back from the road, barely visible from the highway. Neighbors described him as distant but polite. He rarely attended town events anymore. Rarely visited the diner where he used to drink coffee every morning. Over time, stories began circulating. Some claimed he installed heavy-duty locks on every door and window. Others said he kept the blinds drawn even during the day. A delivery driver once mentioned hearing what sounded like a generator running late at night inside the old red barn behind his house. As the years passed, Callahan became more isolated. He declined interview requests about old cases. When the Harper family attempted to contact him in the late 1980s, hoping for renewed answers, he refused to meet. A former deputy who visited him in the early 1990s later described the encounter as unsettling. According to him, Callahan kept glancing toward the barn during their conversation, as if making sure it remained closed. And when the deputy casually mentioned the twins' case, the sheriff reportedly went silent, staring at the ground for a long moment before quietly saying, "That should have stayed buried." In the spring of 2023, more than 60 years after the twins disappeared, Sheriff Robert Callahan's old farmhouse was finally sold. The property had sat quiet for months after his death. No visitors, no family members claiming personal belongings, just a weathered house standing against open Ohio farmland. When a young couple from Columbus purchased it as a renovation project, they had no idea they were stepping into a story the town had tried to forget. To them, it was just an old house with character. Original hardwood floors, rusted fixtures, and an attic filled with decades of dust. The attic wasn't part of their original renovation plan. It was small, with a slanted ceiling and a single circular window that let in a thin beam of pale afternoon light. Boxes were stacked in uneven piles, old uniforms, yellowed newspapers, cracked picture frames. As they began clearing the clutter, the husband noticed something strange beneath a section of loose floorboards near the back wall. The wood looked slightly newer than the surrounding planks, as if it had been replaced years after the house was built. Curious, he pried it open with a crowbar. Beneath the boards was a shallow cavity, and inside it sat a small, metal lockbox coated in dust. It wasn't large, maybe the size of a briefcase, but it was heavy. The lock had rusted over, yet it looked intentionally secured. There were no labels on the outside. No markings. Just a single strip of faded masking tape across the top. The couple carried it downstairs, half joking about hidden treasure. But when they finally forced the lock open, what they found inside immediately changed the tone in the room. The box contained several cassette tapes, neatly arranged in rows. Each one was labeled in black marker with dates from October 1963. Some were marked private. Others read "Do Not File." One tape, however, stood out from the rest. It was labeled simply, Harper. The handwriting was firm but slightly uneven, as if written under pressure. Alongside the tapes sat a small notepad filled with brief entries, times, locations, short phrases that didn't make sense without context. And tucked beneath it all was an old sheriff's badge, no longer polished, its surface scratched and worn. The couple didn't play the tapes immediately. Something about them felt wrong, too deliberate, too hidden. Instead, they contacted local authorities, explaining what they had discovered beneath the attic floorboards. When detectives arrived and saw the name Harper written on that tape, the room reportedly went silent. Because in Millfield, even after 60 years, that name still carried weight. And whatever was recorded on those cassettes had been hidden for a reason. The tapes were transported to the Millfield Sheriff's Office under evidence protocol, sealed in plastic bags like they had just been discovered at an active crime scene. Even though decades had passed, the room felt heavy when detectives prepared to listen. The cassette player they used was old-fashioned, brought in specifically because modern equipment sometimes damaged fragile recordings. As the first tape clicked into place, there was a brief hiss of static, then silence. For a few long seconds, no one spoke. And then a voice emerged from the speakers. It was Sheriff Robert Callahan. The recording was dated October 13th, 1963, just one day after the twins disappeared. His tone was low, strained, nothing like the confident voice the town remembered from press conferences. He wasn't speaking to anyone directly. It sounded more like a personal log. He described driving past the fairgrounds late that night, long after the rides shut down. He mentioned seeing headlights near the access road. A truck parked where it shouldn't have been. Then he paused for several seconds before whispering, "I recognized it." His breathing grew uneven, as if even saying those words carried weight. The second tape was even more disturbing. It captured what appeared to be a private interview, one that had never been documented in official files. The carnival worker, Daniel Reeves, could clearly be heard describing the man by the blue pickup truck. But unlike the brief version preserved in memory, this recording included far more detail. Reeves named the man directly, Thomas Grady, a prominent businessman, landowner, donor to local political campaigns, and most notably, Callahan's brother-in-law. As Reeves continued speaking, the sheriff's tone shifted. He began interrupting, questioning the certainty of the identification, suggesting fatigue or confusion. His voice no longer sounded investigative, it sounded defensive. On another tape, dated October 18th, Callahan spoke alone again. This time, his words were fragmented, almost like he was arguing with himself. He admitted that deputies had discovered something significant near the wooded edge of Grady's farmland, though he never described exactly what. He mentioned soil disturbances, fabric, a smell he couldn't forget. Then there was a long silence, nearly 30 seconds of nothing but the faint hum of background noise. Finally, he muttered, "If this goes public, it destroys everything. Not the department, not the investigation, everything." The final recording in the box was the shortest and the most haunting. There was no introduction, no date spoken aloud. Just Callahan's voice, quieter than before, almost trembling. He described ordering the search teams away from a specific patch of woods. He admitted removing an item from evidence storage personally. "It was better this way," he said, though his tone suggested he didn't believe that anymore. Near the end, a loud metallic sound echoed in the background, like a shovel striking something solid. Callahan inhaled sharply. And then, in barely more than a whisper, he said, "They'll never look where I told them not to." The tape cut off mid-breath. When the recordings were authenticated by state forensic audio experts, there was no longer any doubt. The voice belonged to Sheriff Robert Callahan. The timestamps matched archived duty logs from October 1963. Background sounds aligned with weather reports from that week. The past wasn't just whispering anymore. It was speaking clearly. Within days, the Millfield Sheriff's Office officially reopened the Harper twins case, this time under state supervision. News outlets across Ohio began reporting on the shocking development. A 60-year-old cold case was alive again. Investigators quickly secured a warrant to examine what used to be Thomas Grady's farmland. The property had changed ownership twice since his death in 1981, but the original barn foundation still stood, weathered, partially collapsed, overtaken by weeds and rusted fencing. According to one of the tapes, Callahan had specifically ordered search teams away from a wooded section behind that barn. Ground-penetrating radar was brought in. Detectives stood silently as technicians scanned the earth in slow, methodical passes. For a while, nothing appeared unusual, just layers of soil untouched by time. Then the monitor displayed irregular shapes beneath the surface, two distinct disturbances roughly 8 feet down. The digging began the next morning. The air was cold and still, as if even nature was holding its breath. With each shovelful of dirt removed, tension built among the team. About 6 feet down, the soil texture changed, looser, darker. Then came the first fragment, a piece of deteriorated fabric, pale blue. A forensic anthropologist stepped forward. Minutes later, bone fragments became visible. No one spoke. The silence at that dig site was described later as heavier than sound. By late afternoon, 2 sets of remains had been carefully recovered. Dental records confirmed the identities within days. Emily and Emma Harper had been buried side by side. Forensic analysis indicated blunt force trauma prior to death. Evidence suggested they had not been there long before burial, meaning the crime likely occurred the same night they vanished. Investigators pieced together what the recordings implied. Thomas Grady had confronted the twins near the fairgrounds. Something escalated. Whether it was a failed attempt at coercion, an argument, or something darker, no one could say with certainty. But what became clear was that Sheriff Callahan had known far more than he ever admitted. He had redirected the search, altered the narrative, removed evidence, protected his own blood at the expense of 2 innocent lives. When the final tape was played publicly during a press conference, the room fell silent as Callahan's last recorded words echoed through the speakers. God forgive me. I buried the truth with them. The weight of that sentence hung in the air, pressing against every wall of that courthouse. For 60 years, Millfield believed the twins had run away. For 60 years, a family waited for answers. And now, with the truth uncovered from beneath both soil and secrecy, the town was forced to confront something far darker than a disappearance, the reality that justice had been deliberately buried. For 60 long years, the Harper family lived with questions that had no answers. Birthdays passed. Holidays came and went. 2 empty chairs remained at the dinner table, not because the girls ran away, but because someone decided the truth mattered less than reputation. Millfield trusted a badge. They trusted a man who stood behind a podium and told them there was nothing to fear. But the real danger was never out in the dark woods. It was hidden behind authority, behind silence, behind loyalty to the wrong person. Emily and Emma didn't vanish. They were silenced, and the man sworn to protect them chose blood over justice. In the end, it wasn't a confession in court that solved this case. It wasn't a witness coming forward. It was a guilty conscience, recorded on tape, hidden beneath floorboards, waiting for the day the truth refused to stay buried. Because no matter how deep you hide it, no matter how many years pass, the truth has a way of digging itself back up. And this time, it spoke.
If you liked this video, don't forget to hit that like button, share it with your friends, and drop your thoughts in the comments below. Most importantly, subscribe and hit the bell icon so the next secret finds you first.